Hi there, I'm Ben Jones. Welcome back to Dukascopy TV. The Bank of Japan have expressed concern over political turmoil in the Southeast Asia region, worried that it might affect trade. On the line to discuss this with me is Benjamin Charlton from Oxford Analytica. So Benjamin, if we can begin by looking at Japan's trade figures released today, exports have fallen by 2.7% and imports by 3.6%. What's currently affecting Japanese trade and how damaging are these results?
Well, I think there are a number of factors affecting trade. On the export side, most obviously there's weaker demand from the US, but also China's a major export destination, and a generalized slowdown in economic activity there will have contributed too. There's also the exchange rate issue, the boost from the depreciation of the yen due to the Bank of Japan's quantitative easing under the Abe government, I think has done as much as it's going to do. On the import side, imports will have been affected by the hit to domestic consumption from the sales tax rise in April. In a sense, this slump in household demand after the tax was implemented is just a sort of compensation for a spike that preceded the tax hike as households brought forward their purchases. As for how damaging the May data is, I think it's important to remember that exports aren't actually the main driver of growth in the Japanese economy. For a long time, domestic consumption's actually been the most important driver by far.
Now, the Bank of Japan said in their meeting that they were concerned over the political unrest in Thailand, outlining that this may damage trade. How would this be a factor, and is there anything Japan can do to combat it?
Yes. Well, we saw in 2011, when there were major floods in Thailand, the potential for negative events in Thailand to damage Japanese companies. So Japanese firms will probably have already started to diversify to reduce their exposure to Thailand at that point. Now, the new Thai government following the coup has been keen to shield foreign firms from the negative impacts, but risk perceptions will certainly have increased nevertheless. And firms might be putting on hold any expansion plans for Thailand until there's more clarity over the country's political future. I think there's little the Japanese can do, certainly on the government side, to combat the risks associated with what's going on in Thailand. One might expect some sort of oblique warnings from Japanese officials, sort of hinting to the Thai government that there could be some negative impact on economic ties. And it's also in its role as a provider of information that the government might help firms to reduce their exposure to Thailand if they want to, by helping any efforts they might have to diversify.
And finally, there's a lot of tension between some Asian nations at the moment, particularly China and Vietnam. Japan have expressed that they support Vietnam and, alongside the US, condemn China's actions. Do you think Japan will side against China, and how could this affect trade?
Well, this is not the first time that Abe has made some really quite assertive comments vis-a-vis China, though it's certainly among the most explicit we've seen so far. I think what's more important in terms of China-Japan relations is the flare-up in tensions over disputed islands in the East China Sea, rather than the South China Sea with Vietnam and the Philippines and so forth. But the East China Sea dispute's been going on since 2012. It's not a new development. I think if there were an actual armed clash between the two countries, this would certainly raise risk perceptions dramatically, and it might put political pressure on Chinese and Japanese leaders to impose some sort of economic punishment. But so far, there's certainly no actual disruption to business operations, at least since the protests and boycotts we saw in China in late 2012. The tensions on the ground are all taking place at sea between military and Coast Guard ships and aircraft, and in the diplomatic sphere with sort of trading rhetoric and shipping hasn't been directly affected, neither has air traffic. And a clash is unlikely, although the risk has grown, with what seems like more regular confrontation between military and Coast Guard assets. I think so far, then, this is a very dramatic story, and it gets a lot of coverage in the press, but the economic impact hasn't yet been all that large.
Benjamin, thank you very much for sharing your insight with us today. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Keep clicking back, as later in the day, Monica Gibson will be bringing you Wednesday's edition of Forecasts. Bye for now.